Hello and welcome back to the Else Realm Diner, the cosmic diner that can land anywhere in space and time, and all it demands is good conversation. I am joined as ever by the magnificent Paul Harrison. Hello, Paul.
Oh, Mark,
Hello.
if we're doing Marvel style alliteration, I think you should be the Magnificent Mark.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, yeah. So what would the P be? Do you think for
I'm not
Paul?
really sure. Pustulant.
Oh, I know, fantastic with a PH. Fantastic, Paul. Uh,
Powerfully geeky Paul.
exactly. But nonetheless, we are here today to talk about one thing because we have seen something truly magnificent in the past couple of days, and with that in mind, I'm afraid, folks, this is a spoiler-filled video for Avengers Endgame. We have no particular agenda, really, no particular talking points. We're just gonna just ramble, and hopefully you guys will enjoy it at home. And I mean, you've now seen the film twice. So what do you wanna kick off with? What's your opening gambit?
Well, I saw it first. I saw the screening on the night. I didn't want to be spoiled for this. I've been watching the Marvel movies since, the very first Iron Man. So that's 11 years. I really, really didn't want to use spoilers. And as you well know, working in this online community thing, it can be quite hard to avoid spoilers. So as I'm finding with Game of Thrones of late, which I'm seeing about a week behind everyone else. So I wanted to go on opening night. The only screening we could get into was a subtitled screening because we hadn't pre-booked. It was all a bit last minute and
Okay,
silly and disorganized.
okay.
And even that was busy. I mean, it was a midnight screening in Greenwich, and it was packed. I've never seen it so busy. It was unbelievable. And so we're in a subtitle screening watching it. A lot of people were talking, which really surprised me. I'm quite confrontational in cinemas. If people are talking next to me, I will.
You'll let
I
them
won't.
know.
I won't even stop at the stink eye. I will tell them actively to shut up and
Uh-huh.
see what they do about it.
Uh-huh.
But and I had to do that at one point, which I always find takes me out of the experience a little. But
Yeah.
no, for the most part, people really got into it, and it quietened down. The second viewing was at IMAX. That was really incredible. I hadn't really wanted to see it in 3D because it hadn't been shot in 3D, but it was IMAX 3D and it was shot
Uh-huh.
on IMAX cameras, if
Uh-huh.
I'm not mistaken. And you could really tell. I mean, it just felt so huge and panoramic. So
Uh-huh.
that was really good. I was really glad I did that. But
Uh-huh.
as for the content, all I'll say as an opening gambit is that I actually, if anything, enjoyed it even more the second time round,
Okay. Okay.
which I wasn't sure I would.
Why do you think that is?
I think the first time round, it, for me at least, and I try not to go into films with too much expectation because I think that's the reason that we have these kind of angry fan pushbacks on
Yeah.
certain projects because people have expectations.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, as someone who has dabbled in filmmaking, I don't think it's fair necessarily to have too many abject expectations on what a filmmaker's going to do. It had a number of beats that I would have liked to have seen hit and hit them all really well. And so I really enjoyed it first time round, but I came away with a few questions, particularly because of the nature of the film.
Okay.
So when I went back in, having watched a few reviews and read a few articles online, I had these questions kind of more honed. And I'm just going to say, about things like time travel and the loops and the branching timelines and things like that. And
Okay.
I'd already had arguments and discussions with friends over what those things meant. And so
Okay.
when I went back in specifically to answer those questions for myself. And I think I've managed to, between the internet and the second viewing, get my head completely around what seem like plot holes and aren't.
Okay. Well, shall we come? We'll come to that then.
Let's come back to
A bit
that.
later on. Because for me, the big opening, my big opening gambit is how incredibly bold it was to essentially just immediately jump off from the last film and deliver almost an epilogue for Infinity War. You
Yeah.
have first of all the impact on Hawkeye's family. On Hawkeye rather. His family don't notice anything because they become leaves. And then you have, almost in the blink of an eye, the Avengers turning up and killing Thanos.
Yeah.
It's incredible, and in so many ways it pays off on the "you should have gone for the head" kind of thing.
Yes.
Thor immediately just thinks, "No, okay, fine, you're not lying about the stones being destroyed. I'm just going to take your head," and walks away. And I to a certain extent, I sort of thought that was kind of going to be at least half the movie, but it's not. It's like they just get it out of the way. You get your revenge, but then also crucially, I think, really crucially, really cleverly, you as the audience member, you feel basically what they feel. You feel, and nothing's fixed.
Mm-hmm.
We've killed the guy, and actually, revenge doesn't really work. It was, in that sense, wonderful, because you're left feeling that horror, that empty sort of space, without any promise of some sort of revenge payoff. And then it just says 5 years later. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was a very bold way to open the film, and also a way of just immediately just dealing with the fever. So you see, it puts you into the sorrow and the shock of losing these people, and then it lets you do kind of what you want to do as a person, or what anyone would want to do. You know, get it over and done with, kill the guy. And then now you have to actually be a grown up and deal with what actually happens next. I thought it was very, very clever.
Absolutely, and that scene is so powerful, that, as you rightly say, of translating that emotion or conveying those very complex, feelings that you're left with, and it more than they could have done with any. It's that ultimate show don't tell, isn't it? More than they could have done with any kind of speech by Captain America or what have you. They have you go through the motions of, oh, shit, well, all that anger and that revenge got us nowhere. And then Thor, you can see, is kind of broken by that action in a way as well, of the failure and his second failure in many ways, of giving into that rage, killing the guy, but still not having answers. And even worse, kind of living with the idea of, he deserved it, but you just literally chopped this guy's head off when he was defenseless in a way. It's just a defenseless old man. You're absolutely right. It starts on a powerful note, and I couldn't help but look at Cap in that scene, standing in the background, because Chris Evans is such a good actor in a way that's not even noticeable. He doesn't force anything, but he's believable in everything he does. And they're all brilliant, don't get me wrong. I mean, they all have fantastic moments, especially in this film, which I'm sure we'll get to. But his face in that scene kind of conveyed all of that so well. The almost the sadness, the regret, the sympathy, and it's not overt disgust, but the kind of obvious distaste for what is happening in front of him, that he can't really stop. That he couldn't have stopped if he'd tried, really, probably.
No.
This idea of being that guy who's always had to do what was necessary at the time, and being in a situation where something really awful is happening in front of you. Not to say that Thanos didn't deserve what he got, but still the executioner isn't spared. No. This is an idea that's rich in that scene. The executioner is not spared from that karmic scale, that idea of justice. They're just not. No,
indeed. I think in that sense it also ties back to the first Avengers movie. This notion of, we may not be able to save Earth, but you can be damn sure we'll avenge it, as Tony says. And I remember at the time, actually, back in 2012, when I saw that film, thinking, yeah, but that's a bit of a hollow threat. If Loki wins, there's no guarantee that that there'll be anything left to avenge. And I think in that sense, this film really pays that off, and it really examines that. In that sense, the core of what it means to. In that sense, they're not revengers; they are avengers, and just taking revenge and then having to live with it was very powerful. So So for you then, is that kind of the second kind of milestone in terms of um, impact is what happens to Thor then.
I hadn't really thought about it in those terms, if I'm honest with you, but it seemed like a very.
You haven't thought about it.
Wah, wah, wah.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, I kind of it seemed like the what that thread seemed to me to be was the counterbalance to, and this is a complaint that I've had a few people come back at me with about this film, or I've seen online a few times, and one or two people mentioned, was that, Thor seemed to be like the butt of the joke of the movie. He seemed to be just the comedy element. And on my second watch, I really felt like, actually, no, there's a lot more going on there that you can see the filmmakers have put in there to counterbalance this notion that Thor is just there as the butt of the joke.
Yeah.
And moving forward to kind of his meeting with his mother, it's a beautiful scene. It's a really well handled scene. Rene Russo, damn, for a very brief appearance in the film, carries such weight and such heft and has such influence on one of the key.
Well, and wisdom.
Yes,
just timeless wisdom. And actually, what I think you're right in something. Lots of people have rushed, including a couple of my friends, have rushed to point out with a certain amount of glee that they think Thor has been the butt of a joke because it points out some sort of weakness in, I suppose, the agenda that's anti-male and all this sort of nonsense. But actually, I don't think Thor was the butt of a joke. I think it was a very logical continuation of his growth in Thor Ragnarok. And all the little things also that appear, for example, in Infinity War as well, off the back of that, where you have... So there are moments with Thor as a character that I deeply appreciate. And it's stuff like the little time... Well, no, not timeless, that's not the right word, but seasoned wisdom that's becoming almost like a riddle. So when, for example, someone says "Nidavellir," that's a made-up word, he says, "Well, all words are made up."
Oh, words are made up, yeah.
And you go, yeah, they are. But and he just says it, and But that shows his age. It shows how long he's been not just killing things, but also thinking about things. And in that sense, he's far older than any human will ever be. And frankly, if we got to 120, never mind 150 or 60 or 70. If we got to a fraction of his age, we would be equally seasoned, but also maybe going a little bit quirky. And so I think it's entirely appropriate for him to be that, and then also to be, when he does fall apart, just to fall back into it, to become something like the Big Lebowski, because he has a sort of what happens to him in terms of his weight gain. His decisions about who he's hanging around with, but also what he's wearing and how he just seeks comfort in that sense. So,
yeah.
So it's sweatpants, it's the cardigan, it's the sunglasses, it's the beer, and I don't think it's weakness. I think it's someone who is that warrior who's always thought that actually justice could be found at the end of a hammer, and has realised that actually almost the point, doesn't quite understand and cannot quite reconcile where he might have gone wrong. Because all the way through his entire story, he starts off more or less as a Shakespearean stereotype.
Yep.
He comes through through to Ragnarok, and obviously via Dark World, where he's more or less the same thing, really. But in Ragnarok, he becomes something actually more akin to Tom Stoppard, actually, oddly enough. If we're talking about playwrights, he's a bit more complex, a bit more modern, but also a bit more recognisable for a modern audience. And then I think he's also moved in that sense to the point where Odin was as well. So Odin kind of reaches a point where actually he's no longer bloodthirsty. He actually sees the futility of fighting against the horror and the beauty of nature. And I think there's an awful lot to be said about the way that Thor just sort of embraces. As he says at the end of the film, it's time for him to be what he is, not what he thinks he ought to be. And I think that's oddly enough, yeah, he precisely sums up what I'm getting at. Is that I think that is what he is. I think he is. He is. What in that, I mean, I don't know if I'm making sense here, but he's almost like an archetype in that sense of
Totally, yeah.
sort of Rumpelstiltskin type characters or Gandalf type characters who, because undoubtedly he can still be the god of thunder. He can still, be an immensely powerful being, but he's just moved beyond having to look like it or having to behave like it.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Because if you look at the parallel between, for instance, his behaviour in the first movie, where he's, as you quite rightly say, this kind of Shakespearean stereotype almost, very much what I would have expected from Kenneth Branagh's direction as well, really. But also, you see how prideful he is and how attached he is to those physical things, and he does have that classic kind of hero's journey, that Campbell-style hero's journey arc in that film, which is why I think certain parts of that film do work where others perhaps aren't quite as strong, but the arc itself seems to work. But as a larger arc, what they've managed to do, which I think is so genius, is capitalize on the fact that Chris Hemsworth is a far better comedy actor than anyone might have expected. Capitalize on that, but also humanize this character to the point where he's so far beyond the petty ideas of what he was in that first film that he is gleefully happy when that moment happens on the battlefield where Mjolnir is picked up and hefted by another character on the field. And he's so happy about it. You could see the joy in his face. I knew you were worthy, you know.
Yeah.
And that, to me, attests to the growth of that character so well.
Yeah, well, and you're right, actually. Yeah, because Thor in the first film would have been horrified that anyone else could touch that. Never mind pick it up.
Exactly.
And in fact, he was in that sense, wasn't he? He was absolutely horrified that people were daring to try and pick up the hammer. But to have him almost become, and in that sense, again, I know this might be slightly beyond the scope of the intention, but I think it works in terms of the broader mythology that he's connected to. He becomes something that's a bit more like an Allfather. He's much more. He's taking pride in the achievements of the people around him, in a way that you did see Anthony Hopkins' Odin do in previous films. So I think now the problem is, though, is that to get to that point in this film, though, he does have those moments with Rene Russo. He is in my beloved Durham Cathedral. It was so lovely to see Durham Cathedral. There's a point when he stood. I think he's just been caught by his mum, and he stood next to this spot, basically, which is the most important spot in that cathedral for me. It's more or less where I graduated from. I was like, Thor was there. I was there. But yeah, I was very happy. But there's a point in that where she sort of says, you are my son, but you're not my son from this time, are you? And she sees right through it. Through him, and he doesn't, like, as you say, that pretense is not there because he's so emotionally raw. And when he's like, yes, I'm totally your son, I'm totally your son. And on the one hand, you can see that being funny, but on the other hand, I think that is exactly what he's desperate for a hug. Frankly, at that point, he needs. He's lost his dad in the previous film. He lost his mum the film before that. His brother's gone. He just needs someone. And I don't think at any point was someone actually was he a point of. It was a point of humour, but no one was mocking him. I don't think. I think that was relatively tastefully handled. Okay, well, what's your next point then?
My next steaming hot take from this movie. Okay, so.
Oh, sorry. Just before we move on, I also love that even when he became thundery again at the end, he didn't lose the heft. They basically just platted, the lightning platted his beard, and that
was really important that they did that.
Yeah, well, it was almost like he was a mix between Thor and Volstagg in that sense.
Or a closer approximation between Thor of the comics and Thor of mythology, who is, in many depictions, kind of just a big, hefty guy.
Yeah. But also, actually, crucially, Thor in mythology is also he's a bit silly. He's a bit daft. That's one of the reasons why normal everyday Vikings loved the guy, is because oddly enough, he was not too far from Chris Hemsworth's portrayal of him, actually. So I've seen a couple of videos on YouTube where people are going, they've ruined Thor. He'd reached maximum OP in Ragnarok, and now he's been. But no. Thor even in the mythology, is a lovable buffoon at times, you know.
Yeah.
And so yeah. Anyway, so go on.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, I mean, there's a few ways we can go from here. Um, there's one thing I keep seeing mentioned, and I'm not sure it's true. And I really tried to look more closely on the IMAX version,
Uh-huh.
but I couldn't for certain see a definitive moment. And that's that people are complaining
Mm-hmm.
that a rat is responsible for starting the machine that brings Scott Lang back. Now, I was trying to look really closely at the console because you
Uh-huh.
see a rat scurrying over the console, and people have inferred that, understandably inferred that, oh, it must be the rat that switched something on that's brought him back. And that is a fair supposition to make because that seems to be what's implied. But I didn't actually, on looking more closely, I couldn't see. Granted, this may have been an effect of the 3D, but I couldn't see the rat actually affect anything or switch anything. It was almost like the rat's just drawing our attention to the panel.
Yeah.
The panel happens to switch on at that time because Scott Lang is coming back at that time. And I'd really like clarification from the directors on that.
Yeah, okay, I can see that. But also at the same time, I had no problem with it in so much as it's been 5 years. It could have been 6 years. It could have been 7 years. At some point, a rat in a storage facility is going to crawl
Could do
across the
that.
dashboard. You know,
Sure.
you know, and
Yeah.
so I kind of don't see that as an issue, especially in a time travel movie where if it was 10 years, so what? They can go back to yeah.
Yeah.
But I understand. I do understand, and I understand why some people go, "Oh, how convenient." But it's the monkeys and typewriters business, isn't it? You know, if you eventually
Yep.
order comes out of chaos,
Yep.
just accept it and move on. That's kind of where I was with that. But
Enough rats and enough consoles over enough years, and they'll
yeah,
hit every button on it.
exactly, yeah, exactly. But they will, they'll poop everywhere in the van. But I think for me, it was just a little. I mean, all of that was was very convenient. So Scott comes back, then Scott goes, "Oh, I've been thinking about how I've been in the quantum realm and how I could go through time." Because for me, it was only. Did he say it was 5 hours or something? When for everyone else,
5 hours,
it'd
five
been
minutes,
5 years.
hours. Some very ridiculously small
Yeah.
amount of time. Yeah.
And I think that's in the same way that they also address how in other movies, Back to the Future 2, time travel works in a very particular way.
Mm.
It's almost like they just go through a process of saying, okay, this is a time heist movie, and you're going to have to just come along with us, and you're going to have to accept that Ant-Man has got this thing, and yes, Tony just happens to create the Mobius curve at the right time, and it all just happens to work. But again, it's monkeys and typewriters.
Well, it's not just that though, is it? Because and someone pointed this out. I
Uh-huh.
think it was the guys on the Weekly Planet podcast pointed this out. Stark didn't crack the quantum technology. It took Pym to do that.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
it's only because Stark suddenly has access to this knowledge as well.
Mhm.
He knows how the Pym particles. Arguably, he now knows how Scott Lang's technology works. He knows, like that's available to him. So if that's the case, then yeah, it kind of does make sense as a natural progression that Stark would be the one that would go, well, actually, they've just bought me a whole bunch of threes that I can add to my previous twos and finally make five. It kind of makes sense to me as an evolution of ideas.
Yeah, standing on the shoulders of giants. It's the way science
Exactly.
works. But also as well, I think there's an element there of Tony because to a certain extent, one of the reasons I think that in the first Ant-Man movie, it's clear that Pym doesn't like the Starks because the Starks are clearly very engineering driven, whereas Pym would much rather work with ants and in much more sort of biological kind of approach.
That helmet in the flashback, the original Ant-Man. Oh, loved it.
Yeah,
Sorry, go on.
No, it's very, very good. And so you can sort of see why Pym wouldn't appreciate it, but also you can also see why Pym would have a blind spot for the potential of the quantum realm. I mean, a thought that occurred to me as well, though, is that I like the way that actually, of all things, they're using an entirely plausible method of time travel. Supposedly, small quantum tunnels are the most likely way that you might be able to send something back through time.
Right.
The one thing that they don't deal with here is the radiation buildup. So supposedly, if you open a time tunnel, you would immediately, especially if you're going back in time, introduce your modern radiation into the previous timeline, and then that quickly creates a feedback loop. Supposedly, Stephen Hawking wrote a little bit about that. It depends on how time actually works, but presuming you're going back into your own timeline, background radiation, which is a problem that no one really thinks about, would go through the tunnel and would basically add to what's there, and it would just keep on growing and growing and growing, and very, very quickly, depending on how long that tunnel was open for, you would irradiate the modern world, or the world in which the time travel jump occurred from. So
Wow.
yeah, so there is a theory that, well, there's a notion expanding on that you'd have to do time travel in space, so as to maybe have some sort of shielding, or magnetic shielding or something, so that you can minimize that effect. But obviously, again, they couldn't cover everything, in terms of the
Well,
ramifications of time travel.
okay. I mean,
Yeah.
one thing. I can't do the voice, but maybe it's mostly gamma radiation.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And two, they seem to be using their suits and the pin particles to enter the quantum realm rather than open a tunnel into those places. So it's like almost an airlock. They're opening a door into a realm. They're going into said realm. They're traveling through those little wee tunnel things, and then they're popping out the other side with arguably a door closed behind them, because they have to use pin particles to reopen it.
Yeah, so it's almost like shrinking and growing is the membrane.
Yeah.
And that makes sense.
Essentially,
that makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's just my inference based on my absolute, layman's understanding of quantum mechanics. I read half a guide on it once.
No, but see, then there are other problems as well, in terms of, so if you shrink that, I mean, this is an Ant-Man problem, not so much as a time travel problem, but if you shrink that small, actually your lungs can't process oxygen molecules, because they're still big compared, they're as big as they were. So you would suffocate in seconds. But anyway.
But if you have those masks, maybe the masks hold onto oxygen and shrink the oxygen molecules down,
okay.
so that in transit you're fine, or when you're shrunk you're fine. I think that's part of what the suit does. That's the magic explanation that I've just made up, and I'm sticking to it.
You do that, baby. You do that. Well, actually, speaking of radiation and stuff, Hulk, or rather,
Yes,
Professor
let's talk
Hulk.
about Hulk.
Professor
Let's
Hulk.
talk about the credible Hulk.
Yeah, the credible Hulk. And actually, I thought it was, again, just like Thor, a wonderful way of tackling a very difficult character. Because in previous, I mean, put it this way, my lovely wife can't stand Superman movies, and she can't stand Superman because she finds him to be an utterly unrelatable prospect, in so much as she would characterize him. Boo-hoo, I'm all alone on this planet, and I'm utterly impervious to harm. And I'm essentially a god. So at times she's a little less than charitable when it comes to Superman. And Hulk, for a while, was that for her. So when we saw Ang Lee's Hulk, or the Incredible Hulk, this whole notion of boo-hoo, I want to be with Betty, but I can't because I'm an angry green man. She thought that was the character. That was it. And either he solved the Hulk problem and got with Betty, or he just spent the rest of his existence being miserable. And she wanted to see him grow and develop and change. And thankfully, they found a way to do that without the rightly identified monetary risk of giving him his own movie. Giving Mark Ruffalo's Hulk, first of all, an interesting prospect in the first Avengers movie, where this whole notion of, well, actually, I'm just angry all the time. That's how I deal with it. I'm just never calm. And then allowing him to get to the point again in Thor Ragnarok, where he gets to be the full talking Hulk that I grew up loving in the comics. The Hulk who isn't just just angry. Who has sort of rudimentary and very relatable, sort of almost like toddler kind of emotions. and then yeah, paying that off with the Professor Hulk. I thought it
Yep.
was brilliant. And now actually maybe he could have his own movie, but I don't think he necessarily needs one. I don't think he's been a bit part. I think basically they turned the MCU into one long Hulk storyline as much as anything else.
It's kind of, in a way, it's like it's one lot, and this is so beautifully balanced this way. And I think this is where the props need to go where they're due, because the writers or writer directors in this instance, that team has done such an amazing job of having so many boxes to check, so much to balance, story wise, character wise, screen time wise, action wise, and managed to do that in such a logical and satisfying way. Some people might argue that time travel is never logical, and that's fair, but to hit all of those beats, particularly on a character level where you have so many arcs. Now, granted, in a way, I think a lot of what I have to say about this movie is actually responses to people's responses to the movie, because there have been some voices that have said, well, actually Black Widow's arc was kind of cut off short, or she deserved more, or it took a backseat to the three primary men of the Avengers. And in some senses, yes, that is a fair suggestion, that Black Widow has been sidelined or has been a plot device in a number of instances.
But even then, she's never been a conventional plot device. She's never been a damsel in distress.
She's never been a damsel.
She's never wanted to be in a conventional relationship with any of them. She's never sort of like tried to seduce them or anything like that.
Well, this is the thing that I find, that they managed to fix her in a number of ways, because I feel like Joss Whedon's take on her in Age of Ultron kind of damaged the character a little bit, because she defined herself by her ability to reproduce, and I think every criticism against that is a fair criticism, because a woman is not defined by that thing and shouldn't be in any way. So her considering herself a monster because she couldn't have children seems like a slightly male skewing of her, or an overtly male skewing in some sense. It's hard to say. Some
possibly,
some people will be okay with it, some won't. But I feel like they moved away from it.
Can I just briefly offer a counterpoint to that? As much as I do know quite a few women, frankly, my lovely wife included, who absolutely want to have a child, and hopefully we will have a child, not too distant future. But in that way, it's not that I think my wife would think of herself as a monster, but it would be something that she had not done. An emphasis on having not done it. So you can sort of see how, for her, also for someone who she doesn't really know her family, she's found this new family. For her, family becomes something that she thinks about, and maybe also as well. This is the thing. Is again, I think maybe people are criticizing possibly in slightly the wrong way. For her, the prospect of having family is also another way of paying off that red ledger that she mentioned in the first Avengers movie. My ledger's dripping with red. So Loki says it's dripping with red, but I've got red on my ledger and I want to pay it back.
Yeah.
And in so many ways, again, her end point in this film is paying that off.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And she doesn't do it in a martyr, in a kind of, I've killed so many people kind of way, because she's an assassin. She's kind of accepted that role, I think. And that aspect of herself, but I think she understands that there are greater things to die for, and she's
totally.
She's a godparent to Clint, to Hawkeye's children, and I think also as well she's having to. Sorry, I know I've just sort of taken this right.
Well, this is exactly where I was going to go, kind of tripping on my point, but never mind.
Okay, sorry. No, but also the fact that you see her struggling she's almost become a sort of a Nick Fury character at the beginning of the film as well, hasn't she? She's sort of, she's
absolutely.
running all these different missions around the world, around the globe, and she's carrying that weight with her. And I don't think. I mean, it's good that she's going to get her own film, and hopefully that will put a lot of this characterization into context. But I do, and also but anyway, going back to what you were saying, I do see I know what you mean, but also I think I've always put it in the context of her having being been a girl who had her womanhood ripped from her, and she
taken
became
from her. Yeah,
and
and
she
that's
became an
fair.
assassin. Yeah,
That's fair, but I think it's an unfair characterization to automatically have her consider herself monstrous just because
yeah,
she can't do those things.
no, no,
And what I liked about this film, and I think what they handled really well, was taking this stuff, this essentially these somewhat negative connotations that had been brought out in the previous films, but actually twisting it and turning it into something, that becomes this genuinely kind of heroic ending that does, for her at least, finish that arc. And I can understand that it feels like she's been underplayed, and it feels like she got a bit of a raw deal. She wasn't the first female Avenger to have her own movie, and we can kind of argue the to and fro and box office potential of that. In retrospect, maybe it wouldn't have worked with her at the time. Maybe there was too much competition in the Russian spy genre, which there was. There were a bunch of films of that kind of, with Jennifer Lawrence kind of headlining one the other year, and things like La Femme Nikita. Maybe the space was too crowded for that at that time, which is a shame for her. But her getting her own movie now. And I realise that she's recently just denied that she's getting her own movie. People are still convinced she's getting her own movie. Is that something that's on the board? Is that confirmed, or is that a rumour that everyone's assumed is happening?
I mean, well, the last time I saw one of these Marvel presentation slides that they put up saying, year by year what's happening, Black Widow is on the board supposedly.
But then Inhumans was on the board, and that was very quickly wiped off. I mean, she's dead now, so they either have to undo her death, which I feel like is doing her ending and a sacrifice a real injustice. Also puts the other character deaths in this film at risk and undoes potentially the stakes that they've now laid down. So I think that would be a bad move, which means that they have to go with a prequel, in which case... That's another film. That's another video. I think because we're getting into speculation there. But I don't know.
I mean, I could pitch you an interesting prequel if you want.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, interesting.
The elevator pitch.
Yeah, Black Widow prequel. Things it has to touch on. Obviously, Budapest. Obviously, the orphanage. And her origin there, but also you could use this as a way of telling the story of Steve's grand mission to return the stones. So you could have him. She could interweave in her life with where maybe Steve is almost being Black Widow to Black Widow, turning up, helping out, saying, "Look, don't mention I've been here," kind of thing. And it could be
interesting.
Something like Time Traveler's Wife or something, where this person keeps on coming in and out of her life, and this might be why she's so concerned about him in Winter Soldier, why she's trying to get him a date all the time. It's because she knows where he ends up, and also at that point he would not yet be with Peggy. I know we're jumping forward there in the film. But I think could be something there, and that would also give people a reason to watch it, because it would help to sort of answer some of these other questions that I know you're alluding to in terms of Cap and where he ends up and how he ends up there. So it wouldn't just be a Han Solo movie where they go, put the Kessel Run in there, put the kind of thing.
Yeah,
it would just be Budapest. It would be Budapest, but also it would be tying off a perceived loose end from this movie.
I think you're right in that that's the going forward, so to speak, is the only way to deal with that, because I think it would be a mistake and possibly something we've moved past as an audience to try and just make her origin movie and have a prequel.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that would be a lost child in the film franchise that would just float off into space the way that the original Hulk movie has, I just don't think the audience is in that place anymore. Maybe they would have been once upon a time. No. But that's cool. I like that.
Well,
idea.
But also,
I mean,
but also you can expand on that because of her obvious fear in Winter Soldier of the Winter Soldier. So she's met this guy. She's heard about him. Maybe she's had a couple of run-ins with him, or she's just got there just after he's murdered a room full of people, and that can be tied in with Cap's mission to get the stones. You know, you could have something there that just nicely fills in all this stuff without, because in some ways that's where the Black Widow character, that's where I think that's where her potential really comes from, is that the Eastern perspective to the Western struggle that we've seen as portrayed in the MCU. So having this sort of Russian perspective, which is hinted at in Winter Soldier through the additional Super Soldier program, and also, for example, the assassination of Howard Stark, this kind of thing. But also, have you seen the Peggy Carter TV series?
I actually haven't. No,
Okay.
I didn't have a channel that carried it when it aired, and I never got round to going back to it. So
it's
to speak.
worth grabbing on DVD. It's obviously only 2 seasons. They cancelled it after 2 seasons, but in that, for a start, you see Jarvis as he is in the movie. He's in
the
that
movie,
series,
right?
Yeah. Which was like a double payoff if you'd seen the TV series. We were like, yes. But also in that you get a sort of a precursor to Black Widow's assassin program being developed. So there's a I won't spoil it, but basically you get to see in this sort of post Second World War, pre Iron Curtain Russian world where they're starting to develop these super soldiers, kind of as an extension of the Captain America idea, but using little girls. And you get to see it's almost like the Jason Bourne notion. You know how there's lots of different they develop that program. This is like the program before Black Widow. And this woman comes in there, and again you get, well, actually what was really beautiful about that as well is that you got almost a little Black Widow story in that sense, because this woman was actually jealous, it seems, of all these other women around her in New York who are just living their lives, these American sort of ditzy lives, while she in moments where she's not having to do something for the mission, she has to try and make small talk, or she just kills people because she's fed up with them. It's, again, watch it. It's worth watching, and it might give you a little.
That sounds great.
Something else.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
I saw that in HMV the other day, and I nearly picked it up.
Yeah.
And I decided not to buy any other things until I've moved house. So, but I will get round to that. That sounds like a good addition to the Marvel library, and I like the fact that there was that nod to that show with Jarvis in the 1970 scene. It struck me. Did it strike you as obvious when, as soon as you see Cap, when Cap and Tony go back to 1970 and they're doing that, which is a wonderful scene. Enjoyed it even more second time round. When you see them there, it struck me as, oh shit, he's seen Peggy. There's no way he's not coming back for this. There's no. Was that obvious to you at the time?
I don't know. I think I knew that, again, having both of us enjoyed Agent Carter, and where season 2 ends up. This is prior to the 1970s, where the season 2 of her story ends up. And it was nice. We were both kind of enjoying seeing where Peggy Carter ends up. So seeing her as a joint director of an incipient Shield, at the stage that it's at in the 70s, was really pleasing. But I think what was really destroying my lovely wife was was that window. The fact that Cap was being pulled in 2 very strong different directions. One of them was duty, and one of them was love. And I didn't think that he was about to break the mission. I've heard some people say they thought that he was just going to go, fuck this, open, smash the window and just go, Peggy. But I didn't think he would do that because he's a soldier, and he knows, and he, in that sense, he's the soldier of the team. So I didn't think he would do that. But I was happy that it was paid off. Put it that way. Put it that way. I was very happy that it was paid off. But we'll come back to that. Well, we'll come back to that exact thing. But before we get there, I just want to say Cap versus Cap.
Oh.
Because you know what, I turned to Rachel. I keep on saying my lovely wife because I'm so used to not using her name, but I can use it every now and then in these videos. I turned to Rachel and I said, so the first Avengers, for a while now, and I think I've said to you, the first Avengers was basically a series of fanboy or fangirl what ifs. You know, what
Mm.
if can Hulk pick up Thor's hammer? What if Thor strikes Cap's shield? All this sort of stuff. This one was like the one that we never even thought. That, you know, obviously it has happened in the comics, Cap versus versions of Cap, but it was just such a glorious little payoff to have the two of them fight. And also, I love the way because it didn't occur to me at the time, but on the way home it occurred to me that of course Cap in the past won't think this is weird because as far as he's concerned, he's fighting Loki.
Yep.
Glorious, just glorious. It's so. I mean, something that by the sounds of it, you've come to appreciate as well after a second viewing and after some reading around, is that the Russos didn't just stitch this together and go and approve the first script. They've been thinking about this for years, and all of it is very elegantly put together. And even the perceived plot holes, I think, aren't plot holes. I think they're opening up possibly the idea of multiple universes for a start. And we'll come back to that at the end. But Cap versus Cap. Cap, yeah, America's ass.
America's ass. Yeah, I can do this all day. I know.
I know you can do this all day.
It played off of everything that had become slightly stereotypy or old or used, you know, with that character, and showed you how much he'd changed as well.
Well, and the fact that he opens the whole interaction with "You got to be shitting me."
Yeah, exactly.
You know, Cap wouldn't have sworn. Yeah, exactly.
No, it was great. It really showed how much as a character he'd matured and grown, and and also that, you know, in a very comic booky what if sense, that Cap hasn't really, you know, aged or he hasn't gotten weaker from being, you know, thawed out 50 years later or anything. He's still, if anything, more formidable now because he's learned to fight dirty. So it's a great fan service moment, of which there are many. Some people complain too many. I think those people are clearly not understanding the genre very well.
Well, because so can I just say this?
Yes.
In terms of tone, this whole thing, this was this felt like more so even than Infinity War. This whole film feels like a crossover event.
Yes.
It felt like
so
the big
much so.
Events that you get in Marvel every now and then, or something like like Civil War in the comics, or like, you know, Secret Wars or something. It was,
but even more so, like you sit and you watch, because this time round I was like, I need to watch Infinity War again before I go to the cinema so that I catch all this stuff. And having watched Infinity War again the night before and going in and watching Endgame that afternoon, I was literally sitting in that seat thinking, I feel like I'm reading a multi-issue saga right now. This is what this feels like, and how they captured that. Not that it feels like you say, you know, a bunch of scenes stitched together. It isn't that at all. No. It's multi-layered, and they weave in and out, and it's just this brilliant tapestry.
Well, it's multi-layered, but also I think very cleverly they more so than Infinity, because Infinity War has been praised for how tight the movie feels. It feels like they balance a lot, but it happens very, very neatly, and it just slots together. This movie, I think they very deliberately breathe. They sort of go, okay, for opening section, and then they literally, with the 5 years later, it's like. And now, you know, it's almost like they are basking in it, and they're basking in 11 years of movies. They know that if you appreciate what they've done so far, that you're going to catch all the fan service. But also, they understand that they've earned the right to take the time and to have it almost too full for its own good. But at the same time, it was never gratuitous. It was never. It was never at the levels that you do see, for example, at the end of Aquaman. I haven't yet seen that film, but I have seen, obviously, bits from the trailers. And it was never... it never felt like it was unearned, as in, for example, Batman versus Superman.
Oh.
It felt like... So there was a point... I'll continue this thread of Cap. So where at the end of the film, where Cap is seemingly on his own... Thanos from the past has come into the present, which is again a wonderful turn of events. And in that sense, for people at home, again, you've watched the film. We're not bound here to recapping the whole film. This is just like a stream of consciousness in that sense. But to have that beautiful payoff of on your left, I mean, it almost brings tears to my eyes just thinking about it every time. It's just a glorious. And it's not that it's just that it's clever. It's that it means so much for Cap as well.
Yes.
To have that.
Yeah. It's
And-
deeply satisfying
Yeah.
in that way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like the emotional payoff, even in combat. I don't think I've seen, and the end fight. Some people have said, oh, if I have any complaint, is that it looks a bit too much like the fight in Infinity War, or it's all just a bunch of strewn garbage, and it just doesn't really, delineate itself very well from a lot of the other.
Those people need to watch the third Mummy movie. That's what they need to do, and then come back and be grateful. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's if one can complain about the setting, that's fine. That's a subjective thing. But the emotional beats that a fight scene manages to, and such an extended fight scene, which doesn't, even on the second viewing, didn't feel gratuitous. Didn't feel like they'd overplayed it. No. If anything, it felt shorter second time round. I felt like those moments lasted longer the first time I was watching them, and for me, the personal highlight was, you're seeing Thor have his own axe Stormbreaker pushed into his chest, and suddenly Mjolnir lifts.
Yeah. Well, but the beauty of that scene, though, is you wonder what the hell can knock Thanos off this? What's happened? And then you see Mjolnir flying around. You go, okay, did Thor throw that? And you realize, no, he can't have thrown that. And then the payoff of Captain America picking that up. Just magnificent. But then also using it in conjunction with the shield. Whacking the shield off Thanos with the hammer and all that sort of stuff. But also,
so good. Again,
just another really clever Cap thing was that he wasn't taking Mjolnir into the past at the end.
Meow meow.
As a weapon to use. He was taking it because he needs to return it.
Needs to return it to Thor the Dark World, essentially.
Yes.
Or Thor doesn't have a hammer.
Yeah. Wonderful, just wonderful. I mean, so I feel as though we're getting a little bit, we're sort of getting a bit lost in
we're getting lost in our own fan.
We're in sort of half sentences and gleeful smiles.
So let's go back onto that though. So they pluck Thanos out from the past, from the 2014 timeline into the present. He's then thoroughly defeated, spoilers, and killed. And before we go into like what that means, I think that this is the point where people go, oh well, how does this work with the time thing? Because now they've already very clearly established something you do in the past cannot affect the present and the future, because that is you're bringing them into your present. The past can't change the present or the future, etc. It's all fine. That makes sense to me. Tilda Swinton. We need to pay attention to Tilda Swinton when she describes how this branches and dissects. I've had people argue that, they created a pocket universe by doing what they're doing. No, they haven't done that. They're still in the prime timeline. The only thing that would have changed, there are two key things that would have changed.
Oh, incidentally, did you know that the MCU has been given a universe designation? So
yes.
Prime Comics is 616, and I think this one is 199999. I think
99 or something.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we know it's part of a multiverse. We also know that they have created branching timelines, because Cap going back into the past to take all those things back is to seal off those branches. Those branches all happen. If a branch happens in the past at this point, it's creating a branch from that point in the past. It still doesn't affect the prime timeline, is my understanding of it. Are we on the same page?
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter that they pluck Thanos out of the past and he gets killed, because that just creates a branching timeline off of our main timeline, where in this universe Thanos disappears and the snap doesn't happen. But that's an alternate timeline. It hasn't changed our prime timeline whatsoever. So the only things that will do that are Cap going back into the past whilst we're on Cap and living out his life with Peggy. That's creating a branch.
Yes. And
the directors have actually said, because that to me was the one point that didn't make sense. He shouldn't have aged in the prime timeline there. And they have all but confirmed, yes, Cap going back into the past. This was in Entertainment Weekly, actually. I sent you the link. So
yes, you did. Yes, yeah.
Cap going back into the past creates a branching timeline where he ages and lives out his life with Peggy.
Yeah.
What this means is he actually has to travel back to the prime timeline, which he can do because he's got the means to do that. He always had the means to do that.
Yeah.
So what?
And also,
what
we know that Peggy's likely to develop Alzheimer's and pass away. Yeah.
Exactly. She
Around about the
passed
same time.
away in 2016, I think it is, or
Yeah.
whenever the Winter Soldier is.
Yeah.
So we know that she's gone. He probably, at that point, comes back. People are saying, how can he have his shield when it was destroyed? It's simple. He went back to the past without his shield. He got his shield from this branching timeline, or he had a new shield made in this branching timeline and brings it back to this reality.
Because after all, he's marrying the Shield director.
Exactly.
You know.
Like, how's he have a new shield? Well...
Yeah, well, they have the plans, and they can probably get hold of some more vibranium. It'll be fine. Yeah. And also, as well, this is a Cap who has worked with T'Challa, who knows Wakanda, who will understand how to get. It's not a problem. He can get hold of more. It's fine.
I would love to see that TV show, though. If there wasn't a film with Black Widow, I would love to see that TV show of Captain America on his own timeline, living in the 70s, doing retro 70s stuff. Or living through the 60s even, doing 60s stuff, and 50s stuff. Like, arguably, from what we see, he's gone back to the 40s.
Yeah.
To live out from that moment on, because it's a 40s car, it's a 40s setting that we see outside. So Cap, summing up Cap for me, totally satisfying. Loved it. There are many things we could talk about, from him not giving the shield to Bucky, which is what happens in the comics first when Cap dies, going straight to Sam Wilson. I think that makes sense.
I think it makes sense in the movie. Definitely.
Yeah, it makes sense in the movie universe. Yeah. I mean, that Winter Soldier could never be Cap.
No.
That's the practical point of it, is that he's still arguably a wanted man. He's maybe got a pardon for this stuff, but public perception would never accept him as Captain America. He is a criminal, a war criminal.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, public perception is this is the man who blew up essentially the UN.
Yeah.
Killed at least one country's monarch, and did untold damage in a rampage around Berlin, and that's one of the few public things that they know about. So I think in the movie universe, I think it makes perfect sense. I think it's a real shame that watching these films, I've become so aware of what certain people will think of them. If that's what I mean, I'm really aware of, unfortunately, those YouTube videos that are recommended to me by essentially whinging man boys who
I'm aware of their body of work.
Who complain about things like, for example, who will complain, that Cap skipped over the white guy and passed it to the black guy. They'll complain that Thor gives Valkyrie a non-white woman the royal responsibility on New Asgard. And it's not like the problem is that I don't want that to be an issue, and for me it's not an issue, but I can't help but wonder. I really hope that they did all of this with the characters in mind, and I think they did. I don't think they did it just to fulfill an agenda, as people often accuse, especially Disney in the Star Wars realm, of having an agenda.
Yeah, that's become a real issue, hasn't it? And that conversation has become very toxic. There's no denying that. And you're absolutely right. It didn't feel forced. The only moment that felt forced was, arguably, ironically, the A-Force moment we get in the battle, where you just happen to have all the women in the same place at the same time. And it's like, okay, guys, that is
also
candid and on the nose.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with it. I'll make that clear. I don't have an issue with it whatsoever. But it felt very contrived. Yeah. And there were, I think, easier ways to do that, or other ways to do that wouldn't have felt as forced and would have felt more.
Frankly, they could have done it in a almost like a relay. They didn't actually have to have that perfect shot of them all marching to in slow-mo towards the camera. If it had just been woman passes to woman, passes to woman, passes to woman, I think that would have worked, and I don't think it would have been as noticeable. But it just felt like a callback to the Battle of Wakanda, where she's not alone, and you have the three women. But also,
that feels natural. That feels organic.
Yeah. But because they come across each other in the battlefield. But as you say, and the only reason why I'm mentioning this at all is just because I kind of just want to have I want to get it off my chest that I'm really annoyed that part of me is aware watching those scenes of how some people will want to portray them in their conversations. They'll want to see it as some sort of, especially, anti-white man thing, and I just can't be arsed with it. I mean, for God's sake, Cap has been the whitest, manliest man.
Well, this is the thing,
okay.
isn't it? For every Captain Marvel, we've had 3 Iron Man movies, 3 Thor movies, all of which are focused on these white dudes. The original Avengers lineup, all white dudes and a white woman. I think that there's a perception that it's all agenda driven rather than just organically a matter of, first of all, Black Panther is a thing. This is character. Second of all, Marvel have always been progressive. So you could argue, yes, they've always had an agenda, if you will. But that agenda was that, we want to include people so that they feel welcome to our product and to our universe, and so they feel represented in our universe. And that shouldn't be an issue ever.
Yeah. I mean, heck, X-Men was
X-Men's the perfect example of that. The perfect example. Now, what's interesting is that, of course, now we have content creators who do come from other backgrounds saying, well, I don't actually need the X-Men to tell me about my experience. Why should a bunch of white people tell me what it was like to fight for civil rights in the 60s? I don't need that. And that's fair, that's a fair thing. But it is a product of its time in that sense. Before I fall into some tangent and dig a hole for myself as well, I want to get back to the idea that A-Force would be cool anyway. That's a thing.
Yeah, it would be cool.
So that would be kind of cool, right?
She-Hulk, that'd be a good.
Oh, I'd love to see She-Hulk.
Yeah,
but at the same time, we've got the president now for Professor Hulk. So having a smart, cognizant female Hulk. Cogent. Sorry, that's the word I'm looking for. Female Hulk makes sense. There's precedent for it. But how would you do that, and how would that now be unique now that we've got the credible Hulk?
I think, given the amount of gamma radiation flying around the MCU, it won't take much. It just takes someone who's absolutely lovely to get hit by a truck or something that's carrying some chemicals.
Yeah.
You could Daredevil it.
I think happen to be his cousin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, precisely. Just precisely. Yeah. Or maybe actually, in that sense, you could tie it in with the credible Hulk, by maybe they're having a coffee or something. Yeah. And she goes outside.
This is the lab.
Yeah, and
she's his lawyer.
Yeah, exactly. All of that.
We've got it, Marvel. If you need us.
Yeah, we're right here. Although obviously they don't need our help at all.
They really don't need our help.
They really don't need our help. DC probably needs some help, but
DC needs all the help it can get.
Yeah. But that said, that I don't want to get into it here, but there's been a couple of interesting trailers for DC actually recently. So the Swamp Thing, for example, that was interesting. Anyway, that's next.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, that's a whole nother
you're right. Let's not get to
that. Scarlet Witch.
Yeah.
I thought that was brilliant. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. Finally seeing Scarlet Witch somewhat unleashed. I mean, she's still nowhere near as powerful as she is in the comics, but to have that, well, exactly, yes, but to have that come out of grief and anger and sort of a righteous rage, I thought was really nice. Instead
what
of it
a great
just
comeback as well.
Yeah.
I don't even know who you are. You will.
Yeah, you will.
Yes, go on, girl.
Exactly. Yeah. And the fact that he's so shit that he's just bombard the place.
No, she really kicked ass in that fight. That was great.
Yeah, and I don't think she really took a hit. It was just because she wouldn't. She's Scarlet Witch. Scarlet Witch is genuinely terrifying, and I think in the previous movies, I think they've not known how to deal with that because they don't want to stray onto Fox's perceived territory. But I suspect that they've gone this far with her because now they feel as though actually, soon we're going to have hopefully X-Men.
They have the rights now. They're pretty much tying it all up, aren't they? So that's that.
So she's no longer a miracle. She's now.
Well, this is great.
They didn't call her a mutant, but she's much closer to being Scarlet Witch.
Much closer to being Scarlet Witch. Her powers are from an Infinity Stone. The Reality Stone, is it? I think the powers come from.
I don't know if they. Oh, you mean in the comics?
No, in the film universe, they're an experiment from one of the stones because they're released from.
Yes. Well, no, I think
Sokovia,
I think they use the space stone. So they're
stone?
using Loki's staff. I think at that point, aren't they?
Ah, right. Okay. Yes.
To
that makes
imbue
sense.
them with powers. That's what it is. But yes, I think. But yeah, so her powers though they have the same color as the ether and the Reality Stone. But I think that's just because she's Scarlet Witch. It has to be red, doesn't it? But I thought that was magnificent. I thought that. So now we have to. Obviously, we have to come to Tony. I mean, we've been talking now for about an hour and 10 minutes or so. Or
we need to. Yeah.
No, it's fine. I'm happy to go for 2 hours. I don't mind. But we have to. Yeah,
I have to vote today.
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah, but I'm just around the corner voting. Stark.
Stark.
Brilliant. And I think it was. It's really, again, if you've seen the film, you know exactly what I'm getting at. But it was beautiful to see the promise of him having a family and having Morgan, because they sort of name, ostensibly in a dream he names a child Morgan in the previous film, doesn't he? In the dream it's a son, in the movie it's a daughter. To have a little hint that she's actually quite precocious as well, and that she didn't have to be like genius level yet. I'm sure he wasn't quite genius level. I think they mentioned something in the first Iron Man movie about him having built and rebuilt an engine or something by the age of 6 or something like that. But that's not. She didn't have to understand time travel yet. And to have that they cut through it all with "I Love You 3000." They tell you exactly what the stakes are for him, and with his, as you say, with the relationship with his father that's been set up, and then having the father seen in the film, glorious, just glorious to have to really pay that off. And he's not, he's probably the closest to. Because the thing is, I've always quite liked the character. I like smart people talking smartly, if that makes sense.
Yep.
I know that's a deeply ironic sentence. Smart people talking smartly. Yeah, using the big words. I love smart people talking smartly, and I think his confidence and in that sense, his arrogance as well was in that sense also justified. But the way that's partly, I think, to keep Downey Jr. interested, the way that they've made the character change over the years, and the way that they've allowed Downey Jr. to have an input on that, has meant that he feels probably the most bearable that he's ever felt. So my brother-in-law just can't stand Robert Downey Jr. being Iron Man. But I think in this movie, he's not the billionaire playboy philanthropist arsehole. He is a clever man with a conscience and with the weight of the world on his shoulders.
Yep.
And also the fact that he meets his father when his father is younger than he is. It's because his father calls him. He says, "Was it? Is it? It's not old man, is it? It's Pops or something, isn't it, or something like that." Just like a throwaway.
He uses a term like that, doesn't he?
Something like that. He goes, "Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Nice meeting you, Pops." That kind of thing. It's a sort of, obviously it hits home for me because I never really knew my father, but also it makes the beauty of the snap at the end, not only with the echo of the "I am Iron Man," the thing that set off his whole adventure, but also the fact that he, well, actually, as Doctor Strange says, if I tell you what has to happen, it might not happen. I think it. Beautiful. So I'm losing words here. Do you want to pick it up a bit?
so touched by the emotional heft of Iron Man.
Yeah.
To be honest, like Iron Man coming straight out the gate, I was just wowed. It comes out at a. Was it the same year as Dark Knight or the year after the Dark Knight? It's 2008, isn't it? Iron Man.
Yeah.
And it just came out of the gate so strong.
Yeah.
And I've always enjoyed the work of Jon Favreau. I really liked Downey Jr. in a number of films, that I'd seen him in. So, just
also,
seeing
I really like Jon Favreau's work on Chef. Have you ever seen Chef?
Oh, you know what? I haven't seen Chef. I've had it on my list for forever, and I think it's actually probably not no longer on Netflix because it certainly was at one point.
No, but Downey Jr. makes a cameo appearance, but also you have the chef character played by Favreau
Yeah.
has as his sort of booty call Scarlett Johansson, and you're just like, he's just written himself the best role in the world.
That
Like,
is brilliant.
he has a wife in that movie who's like a Cuban entrepreneur, but also is astonishingly gorgeous and super supportive. It's a lovely film. I'm not just sort of going on about how beautiful the women are. It's a great film, like, but also you can see that Favreau was just like, I'm gonna have some fun. I'm just gonna enjoy myself, surround myself with friends and beautiful people. Anyway,
Fair
cool.
play.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I got into his stuff when he was working with Vince Vaughn on the original movies that set in LA. What was it? It will come back to me. The second one's called Made. The first one is about the experience of they're all actors and filmmakers in Los Angeles in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. Classic film. The name of it's just totally fallen out of my brain. It will come back to me. But
Okay.
so I was really excited when I heard that he was running the Iron Man movie. I had not been a particularly consistent Iron Man fan as a kid. I had a few issues. The same
Yeah.
with Cap, really. I was all about Spider-Man as a kid, if I'm honest, and the DC heroes.
Well, and the problem is when you dip into Iron Man and Cap, actually, you get the sense, and also actually, frankly, when you dip into Superman, you get the sense that they're a one-trick pony. That's the problem. In any one issue, it kind of feels like, okay, well, Iron Man's going to solve this with being either rich or clever or having an Iron Man costume.
Yeah,
Cap's
totally.
going to solve this by being virtuous.
Yeah.
Superman's going to laser his way out of. That's unless you're seeing the character arc, you just sort of see the superhero and that's it, don't you? I think.
And that's the thing. And his arc in the comics is actually so good. I went back and revisited all the old David Michelin stuff and, there's old Iron Man books from the late 70s, early 80s that did rightly become classics. And the artwork in them is astonishingly good, actually. The line work's incredible. So Iron Man, as you say, starts everything off, kicks it into motion. We get a very solid picture of who this character is in the early part of his career. We see him almost devolve into an antagonist, a sympathetic antagonist, whilst we're rooting for Cap in Civil War, or for the most part, I was rooting for Cap in Civil War because I felt like he was right, but at the same time, I still sympathized for Tony Stark. He's, for seeing his parents killed that way, he's got, oh God, yeah, of course, this is such a conflict. By the end of the film, you feel awful for all of them.
Yeah.
And you understand his bitterness.
Well, but also actually in Iron Man 2, and I know people often overlook it as the weakest of the Iron Man movies, although Iron Man 3 for others is quite weak. Depends on how you want to look at it.
I preferred 2, but absolutely.
Yeah, but in Iron Man 2, you see him devolve with the prospect of him being mortal. So he's suddenly, oh shit, I'm not going to live forever, even though I've got everything in the world. In the third one, he has to deal with whether or not he is the hero or whether the costume is the hero. And by the time he gets into Civil War, he's so much more mature than he was in the first film. But also, he's still got that core thread of, I have caused so much death and disaster in this world, and I don't want to be known as the Death Merchant. I want to be the suit of armor around the world. And I think to this, then carry that on, and then him become a mentor to Spider-Man, and then it's beautiful, and again it's what they did with Hulk, and I think maybe that is this the thing, and is this the trick that even, for example, studios like Warner Brothers have missed, is that none of these films are actually films, they are chapters in a story. And it sounds bloody obvious, like it really does, but actually they are chapters in a story, and that's why they were happy to take a bit of a hit when it came to the Mandarin reveal in Iron Man 3, because as far as they were concerned, that was a movie about Iron Man reattaching to his self-worth following Iron Man 2 and then going into Civil War. That wasn't about the Mandarin, and also they weren't ready for magic at that point. You understand why they did it. That, I think, is probably also where they've had their fortitude and their confidence from, is that they knew that, I'm not saying that they knew exactly what was going to be written in 5 years' time, but they knew that this was these stories connect together, and they tell the character, they build on the character, they build on what's come before, and they're going to be added to I think that's probably the confidence that they always had, is that they're going to be able to add to these things. And
Yeah,
also,
absolutely.
I mean, I think by that point they were making so much money that they could afford to have a Duff Iron Man film, because they can always, if there's something that really has to be corrected, they can correct it. So as with Thor, they could correct it. And that said, that with the first Thor film, though, I don't think it was a terrible misstep. I just think it was immensely bombastic, and it couldn't have continued for too much longer. But it
Absolutely,
was
and they
still a
found
great
their
film.
feet. They found their
Yeah.
feet. But going back to Iron Man and,
Yeah.
and sidebar on Iron Man 3, I think it did a couple of really important things. The first point that you very aptly noted, that it reattaches him to his humanity and defines who he is without his suit. Very important character growth for that character. And the second part was that it reframed what an Iron Man movie, or a movie with Iron Man in it, could be in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. So we'd already seen him used to great effect in Joss Whedon's Avengers, but in his own solo movie, he became more than just a guy who fights some foreign guy with technology.
Yeah.
I like the fact that Shane Black undermined the idea of the threat being an exterior thing, and having it be a hoax, almost having it be a feint, having it be this illusory kind of guise for the real threat of the movie, who wasn't much of a threat. I mean, Guy Pearce, let's face it, is not memorable in that film. The Mandarin is the memorable one, despite not being, even though he's like in his dressing gown, oh bloody hell, what's going on,
But then again, in its own right, that was kind of lovely,
Yeah.
Well, my Macbeth was the toast of Chiswick,
Is it?
that kind of thing,
Exactly. It's very Shane Black. It's very, if you love Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and you go into Iron Man 3 going, I love Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, I kind of feel like this is going to be a Shane Black movie. It's enjoyable. At the same time, yes, there are some aspects of it, elements that don't align as well. But anyway, Iron Man 3.
Well, but also I think thematically it works, because actually, in a very all too real way, sadly, the US does always need a new enemy. It seems like they're addicted to finding who they need to bomb next, or who they need to feel threatened by next.
It's all getting a bit serious.
It is getting a little bit serious. No. But I see, it's the part of the beauty of it is the way that it
is
also
commentary.
it is commentary in that sense as well. So yes, but then to have Stark get to a point where he well, initially, obviously, with Hulk trying to do the snap, and also, I've seen some complaints as well that, well, how the heck was he able to make his own Infinity Gauntlet? When Thanos himself in space, couldn't make his own one. He had to go to Nidavellir. I don't know.
Thanos isn't Tony Stark, though. We've already established that Tony Stark is, as an engineer, the greatest mind on the planet. That's a given. That's why he's Iron Man. He's the greatest engineer on the planet. And if you accept that pretense, then it totally makes sense. It has to be that way. He has to have made that gauntlet, because otherwise there's no way he could have just gone, I'll have those stones off the gauntlet I designed on my own gauntlet, thank you very much. That's the only reason that works.
Yes, and presumably in that sense, he, without telling anyone, has built in a backup gauntlet into his glove, just in case. Which...
Or he's using his nanotech to communicate with his own tech, which is what it is. It just follows that. Because that was on the first viewing, I was like, wait, how did he get the stones off, and why did they not do that in the first movie then, if that was that simple? But then, of course, it's like, no, he made that gauntlet. Of course he could get the stones off of his own gauntlet.
And just sort of replicate the design in the nanotech on his hand. But the fact that he does snap and the Iron Man was very powerful. But also, actually, I thought there's the strongest argument, as far as I'm concerned, for Downey Jr. at least getting a nomination in the Academy Awards for this whole arc as Tony Stark, was the fact that
he's Tony Stark.
I know.
Sorry, I thought we were doing bad.
I know. No. I heard it as I said it, and I was thinking, no. I'm trying to be serious. No, but you're right. He's Tony Stark.
Ruin your day. Ruin your videos. That's what I'm here.
So the reason why I think he may well deserve a nomination is because at that moment when he has snapped, he he's clearly not. I think he's basically brain dead, isn't he? After that moment, he's catatonic or something, because he's a mere mortal and he's snapped. Not only does it physically char him, but he's just not present. He doesn't really respond to
Yep.
Peter Parker saying, "We've done it,
Yep.
Mr. Stark." He's just sort of bewildered. I
Mm.
don't think he. I don't think Tony actually understands what he's done, because or the fact that he's won in that sense. And I think that's beautiful, because actually, just as with the most harrowing scenes in things like, Saving Private Ryan, in the moment you may well eulogize the sacrifice of someone, but actually in the moment you have people crying for their mum or something,
Mm.
or the pain and the agony, or the shock of something is overwhelming. And for him in that moment, it was like it was a war scene. It was like a bomb had just
Yeah.
gone off next to
Yeah.
his head, and he wasn't really present. And the fact that, again, it makes me a little bit teary, but the fact that Gwyneth Paltrow's Pepper Potts sort of goes, okay, kid, yeah, whatever, takes him to one side and just says, "You can rest now." She doesn't say, "I love you," and I think she recognises again that he's not really there. It's more a case of, you can go to sleep now. I just thought it was beautiful. It was just a wonderful, wonderful way to finish it. And also, I suppose on that note, do you want to see Tony living on in another form? Some people are suggesting that he could come back as,
AI
the
or something.
AI or the user interface in Spider-Man's costume or
Of the
something.
suit. Yeah.
I'm not sure, because I mean, in the comics he has been an AI construct. At one point, he was, he had downloaded his consciousness onto a computer, and he was basically a suit that was projecting a sort of a, he was Holly from Red Dwarf.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
that sense.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Um,
I've actually, I think this ties really well into another point that I wanted to make. So I want to jump in on that, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Is that I think the words "too soon" come to mind, and "as long as it's earned," and this
Yeah.
is a big theme for me, because every one of those characters, and this was a worry for me going into the cinema in the wake of Captain Marvel and all the hate Captain Marvel had. It seems like an aside, but I'm coming to kind of the same point. Is that that moment from Tony Stark, especially from Downey Jr., no one had earned, other than Chris Evans and Chris Hemsworth at that point, who followed kind of on his coattails in a way. No one had earned that moment as much as him. And that's why it's that beautiful closing of that circle. And they shouldn't open that up again anytime soon, because it was just a perfect, it's just a perfect end to Tony's arc. And, his arc reactor, and I'm just ruining this with bad puns now. I can't stop myself, mate. You have to mute me. No, but it really is. It's just like it really is a beautiful moment. It's but it's earned, so earned, and all of the other characters feel like they earned those moments. And even Captain Marvel, who, there were a lot of haters, there were a lot of people complaining online saying, she better not come in and just kill Thanos off. And actually, in a way, she kind of does. And that's what they do in that first 10 minutes of the movie. In a way, they have Captain Marvel do what everyone was dreading she would do, in a way, is that come in and steal the thunder from everyone who's been there along the ride. Now, I think they handled that perfectly well. And I think they handled her really well, in that she comes in, she does some stuff. Some people are going to argue she was underused, fine. But I think that every character had to earn their place in this movie, and she hasn't yet, and that's fine. She will, she started that journey.
Yeah, but also I think in that sense she earned her place as a Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah.
She earned her place as the only thing that could presumably follow a signal that Rocket was able to track to the place where the ship is and bring the ship home quickly.
Yep.
She
ferries a lot of shit around.
Yeah, she does, and that's fine. That's fine. Especially if again, the much examined attitude of Brie Larson is one of forcefully making the case that women can be exactly the same as men. Well, she's been Superman for this film. Great, well done. Okay, and now she gets to hopefully build her character a bit, and that'll be wonderful. And actually, I like that they hinted at that in so much as they gave her, the haircut, that she has in the comics, and it's clear that there is room for her to grow, and you know, we'll leave the actress to one side and what people say. And
Yeah,
think
yeah.
about her.
I think we have to
Yeah.
separate the actor from the art at this point, actually,
Definitely,
because that's another conversation, definitely.
Definitely, but in terms of closing that circle, and this is something that I said to you just before we started filming, and it's actually the first, because I messaged you after I watched it. Well, actually, I messaged you before I watched it, saying, "So, are there any X-Men?" And you were just like, "No, just go and watch it." I messaged you after I watched it, and you were like, "I'm in D&D," but yeah, it was good, wasn't it? But when I messaged you, the thing I messaged was, Marvel just did the death of Superman. And they did it right. And so much as, again, in the same way that the whole film feels like a comic book crossover event, the funeral scene felt like the death of Superman. It felt like that cover where you have all the DC heroes lined up behind Superman's coffin, sorry, with Batman at the front, and it goes on from there. And Wonder Woman. That's what was in this, and I think arguably Strange being so prominent in that scene is an argument that he's probably going to become one of the triptych or the trio in the next phase, and that was basically what DC should have done. They should have waited 22 movies and then kill Superman. But kill him in a way that the world feels it, and you see all these people that this man's life has touched, and you understand each and every one of those stories. That was the most beautiful aspect of that funeral for me, was that it was essentially the death of Superman, you know, but it was Iron Man and the MCU did it.
And who would have known 11 years ago, man? Who would have known how huge that would become?
Yeah.
So, I mean, Iron Man was not a household name in 2007.
No.
At all.
No, not at all. No.
So that is crazy. What an accomplishment. What an accomplishment this film is, and what an accomplishment they've made with the series, really. And where does it go from there? That's another video.
It is. Well, but that's it. I think that there is a bit of room here just to sort of touch on that. I suppose first of all, just a couple of little sort of housekeeping elements for this film. Ronan, I thought was brilliant. I thought the character of Hawkeye going.
But
on
his haircut was well shit. Let's be fair.
Yeah, his haircut was ridiculous here in terms of the size of that.
It's like, mate, you're in your 40s. Don't do that to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, calm it down a little bit. But I thought the character was good. I thought his reaction to his family dying in the way that they did was very appropriate.
Yeah, that was really good.
I thought that it was a brilliant way of reminding us of the relationship between Romanov and Hawkeye, to have her approach him, and actually approach him just as she approached Hulk in that sense.
Yes.
Knowing the danger of this person, being in his presence, and knowing that she, if he wanted to, he could kill her, but she just went there with an umbrella.
He probably couldn't, though. Let's be fair. He probably.
I don't know. In that moment, he had a sword. She had an umbrella. You know, I mean,
I don't know. I personally think that she's probably better than him. That's another one of those big fan geeky what ifs, isn't it? I still think he's probably the best with a bow in the world, but arguably not as good as her hand to hand. I would say.
Okay, fair enough.
And in fact, we kind of see that when they're trying to out-sacrifice each other. She just won't go down, man. She's hardcore.
No, that's true. No, and also that says
my categories.
Yeah, she does win that. Yeah, that's true. But she wins. Yeah, she wins that suicide. But I think I thought it was good. I also think that in that sense I think it was a brave decision for them to not just have him die, because, you know, conventional, especially Disney-related products, would say, okay, he's a hero, but he's just gone around the world murdering a whole bunch of people. This man is irredeemable. And conventional wisdom would have had him as the guy who jumps off the cliff. But he doesn't. And I suppose now, actually, interestingly, we get to possibly see what happens next for him as well. Which should be.
I think he'll retire. That's just my steaming hot take that means nothing. But I don't think we're going to go back to Hawkeye. I would be surprised actually if. Well, okay. So here's the thing. Two things that occurred to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yep.
and one of them is a tangent, so I'm sorry about that. But two things that occur to me, and that's that moving into this new phase, I think that Thor is obviously gone into the Guardians universe, and that's probably where he'll be relegated. Credible Hulk, I would
Well, so
love to see a Credible
relegated, but
Hulk.
also crucially, Hemsworth doesn't have to keep the bod up anymore.
Yes,
It's
but he
very
probably
clever.
will because
He
of
no,
his
he
career.
will. He'll keep a bod. He's not just like he's gonna. Cause I don't think he actually became that fat for the movie. I think that was
No,
digital. You could tell it
I
was
think that's
digital.
prosthesis because they had to shoot around him being in both states, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
And so when you actually see the body and the head for the first time, I think it's the same technology they used to have Chris Evans's head on a skinny body in the first Avengers movie.
And when he's old as well,
Exactly.
when we have old
Exactly.
Chris Evans, yeah.
So sorry, yeah. So that, but I think it's clever because they've got around the need for him to have a ridiculous body. Basically, I think it's very
And
clever.
they realised they cracked the Thor formula, and he works in a cosmic setting really well and a comedy setting really well. So that all adds up,
Yeah.
really, just
Yeah.
beautifully packaged. Bang, there you go. Put Thor in there. We'll see if that breaks the Guardians dynamic or not, but I don't think it will.
No.
And then I think we probably have Hawkeye very rightly retire. He's earned it. I think Ant-Man gets to step up. Now, the scenes with Ant-Man, actually, and I did want to mention that the scene where he goes home and his daughter's grown up. It's a beautiful scene when he first kind of realizes, oh my God, you're alive, and it's nice. It's really nice.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of scenes like that as well, weren't there? There was a lot of that's kind of an ongoing theme. This theme of family. Actually, they don't hit you over the head with it, but it's
No.
beautifully portrayed.
Well, and I think as I've seen other people say, but as I've certainly said in the past before this film came out, one of the strengths of these movies is that increasingly they're less and less about the superheroic acts, and they're about the human who's living with those powers.
Yeah.
And actually, I think Ant-Man could be an interesting one because. So, for example, in the Marvel Zombies run, interestingly enough, Ant-Man. Well, I think that's Hank Pym. Technically, I don't think it's Lang.
Right.
But the point is that it becomes clear that he is leadership material. He's also quite dangerous in terms of he has got a slightly shady background, and that's partly baggage coming from the perception that Hank Pym is potentially a wife beater from the early on in the
Ultimates
comics.
universe, or
No,
yeah.
no. Ultimate's built on it. So basically,
Ultimates built on it. Okay.
in the 60s or 70s, it's interesting actually when you look at the history of it. So there's a panel in a story where the artist drew Hank kind of recoiling almost from from his wife, sorry, and and then whoever coloured it or something like that, they decided to make it look. They thought, sorry, it was a scene of him striking her, and then he became the wife beater that we see
wow.
in Ultimates, and in Ultimates they really go to town on that, which it's really
Mark Miller's not
uncomfortable.
known for his subtlety.
No, exactly, no. But also, I think I'm sorry. I mean, just a slight tangent, but Ultimates, I think it's really quite an ugly universe in that sense. I mean, Spider-Man Ultimate, I like, but that's different. I guess it's a slightly different thing.
Yeah,
But
the Ultimates
the
themselves
Ultimates,
are a really rough and dirty take on, which is funny because it was such a strong influence on the aesthetic and
Yeah.
even the casting in some
Yeah.
cases. Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury is straight from the Ultimates.
yeah,
And
yeah.
to see the influence, having reread those actually reasonably recently, to see the amount of influence those books had on those Marvel movies is remarkable, especially when you consider how different the core of the stories is and how different
Yeah.
the nature of those characters really are.
Well, and also, I mean, so for me, one of the most uncomfortable and crass elements of those stories is Hulk as a super horny, sort of grim, basically a huge rapist. Like just like
Truly monstrous, yeah.
yeah,
He's
really
really
ugly.
horrible in those
Yeah,
books.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. You can sort of see someone making an argument for that being an extension of what Hulk represents in terms of inner desires and frustrations coming out. So you can see
We've
that.
gone way into the weeds now, my friend.
Yeah, but no, but I think it's handled terribly in that anyway. So sorry, yeah, so you were saying so Thor, Guardians of the Galaxy, Hawkeye, probably retired, and actually, arguably, him retiring could actually be his irredeemability in that sense. He might not come back precisely because he has basically been going around the world killing people. It could just be as simple as that. Yeah,
exactly. I like that they squeezed the Ronin stuff in. That was
yeah.
I really enjoyed that particular part of the Avengers of the early noughties or whatever it was. I'm glad they did that. I think going forward they've got a lot of options still though, because they've just acquired or are in the process of acquiring all of the Fox Marvel properties. It's been all but confirmed that all the current Marvel franchises that are in Fox's hands will be tied up. I think there might be one or two exceptions. Deadpool is still going to be managed by the same people, and because it's made oodles of money at very little cost. The X-Men film Dark Phoenix is said to be the last of that iteration, that timeline or franchise or whatever you want to call it, universe is going after this. So
thank goodness.
Well, it's had its high points, It gave us my favourite Wolverine.
No. Sorry. It has had its high points, but I think it's overstayed its welcome, and I think they don't really know what to do with it. They keep on telling
the mere fact that they're repeating the Dark Phoenix storyline that was already told.
Well, exactly, and the thing is, I was about to say they keep on telling basically the same story and over and over again.
Is there a train in it? We need a train in it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Can we have Magneto start out, as a civilian and then become embittered and then start to hate people again?
Can we have Magneto as a bad guy but also a good guy? Okay.
Yeah. Can we have a cake and eat it? Yeah, exactly. But also, so the Quicksilver stuff is great in those movies. I'm sure there's going to be a wonderful one in Dark Phoenix. But yeah, I'm ready. As Reggie Fils-Aimé said, my body is ready for mutants in MCU, definitely.
For me, it all could have finished with Logan.
It could, yeah. Oh, sorry,
arguably
yes.
Arguably should have all finished with Logan, because it ties up that, granted, alternate continuity or whatever it was. But, Apocalypse wasn't... I enjoyed it, but it wasn't... We're getting really into the weeds now. But anyway, so they've got all those properties in the future if they want them. I would imagine at some point we'll see those characters or some of those characters in the Marvel universe. They'll start experimenting with that. I mean, there's no reason for them to... A lot of people are saying, "Oh, is that it? Are we done with the Avengers?" No, but equally, I think what we might see is a branching out from the Avengers being the big event movies to, well, actually, we can cross over now. Will we one day see Avengers versus X-Men?
Well, and actually, you see, that would be my pitch. You see, 'cause, another elevator pitch here. I wouldn't tell the same story again with the X-Men, just like they didn't with Spider-Man. They found a way to find him in medias res. I think in this case, what you do is either as a result of people messing about with Infinity Stones, or due to some other nefarious influence, possibly a hint to maybe the big bad in Phase 4, or maybe at the end of Phase 7 or something, something happens that sets off mutations in humanity. And I think initially, Avengers characters don't know if that's good or bad. So cast the Avengers as government almost, as portrayed in the 90s X-Men cartoons and also in the 1960s, and have... For almost, I suppose, what they were going to do with Inhumans, but they rightly shelved because they knew they were possibly going to get to play with the X-Men. Tell us the story from the X-Men's perspective. Have those mutants suddenly terrified, even though they live in a world where there are superheroes. That's very few and far between. Mutation is now something that's actually disturbingly common. People are freaking out, just as people actually in the real world are freaking out about, oh my god, transgender issues, this kind of thing. That's become something that is in the mainstream consciousness, but the percentage is very small. So you could, in terms of real people who actually want to to transition in terms of their bodies, and you can have that effect portrayed in the X-Men universe. So have all the media, paranoid right-wing tabloids talking about your grandchild could be a mutant, when actually it's going to be like one kid in 3 schools might be a mutant. So have the problem overstated, and then have a situation where they come to loggerheads in a way that's I'm not quite sure how you would play it, but you'd have to have it so that there's something that almost like the Sokovia Accords or something else where the Avengers they're quite rightly trying to look after humanity. Or maybe this is the next thing that Falcon's Cap is having to deal with or something. But they find themselves first of all thinking that the X-Men are on against them. I guess a little bit like what happened in Captain Marvel. I'm trying not to spoil that. Have you seen Captain Marvel?
I have seen Captain Marvel. I know to which you allude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a bit like that, a bait and switch in terms of who's the bad guy, and that's how you introduce them. I think they have to be a dangerous element first before they're familiar. I think Beast has to be beastly, for example. I don't think he can, from the outside perspective, be seen immediately as a huggable intellect. He has to initially be, good God, what the hell's that? Kind of thing.
And that's something that they did do quite well.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say that's something they did handle quite well. The Ultimate X-Men storyline focuses on that at the outset. Really, it focuses on the idea that mutation is this scary thing that's happened. There are these mutant terrorists out there, and the X-Men aren't really discerned or discernible from those mutant terrorists. They're all seen as, and so this kind of proactive response, in a way, the Sentinel program is out there before any nuance has entered the conversation, and that's something you could very easily kind of transpose over from our current world situation onto
well, and especially
fiction, right?
No, but also actually, especially when you've already had some of that sort of proactivism hinted at in, for example, Age of Ultron. So it wouldn't take much for whoever inherits Stark's interests to apply that logic to this new problem. Oh shit, Tony isn't here, but we've got all the technology, and what would he have done? Well, he would have done, let's finally do the suit of armor around the world, because we didn't do that and he died. We don't want that to happen again, so we're going to just put Sentinels out there to deal with this threat. Yeah, you can see how that would happen, and it would happen from a very honourable place. But then suddenly, yes, you've got, and I like that. I like this. That's something I suppose I forgot to really think about in my pitch. Is that initially it's not just X-Men, is it? It's mutants. Yeah. So yes, you'll have some who are affiliated with, for example, Magneto and co. Some who are just out there, just either causing chaos or actually maybe doing really weird things. You could have like new religions started where people could have mutants who are able to do miraculous things, and these things are coming out of maybe the countryside, sort of, or far off in the distance in mountain tops and things. People going on great pilgrimages to see these mutants, and that could be really good. And that would also help to explain things like why, for example, we haven't seen them so far in MCU. I think they have the tools to do it, and I think they well, in that sense, I think they can do anything they want now. I think that they've not only earned the trust of the cinema-going public, but also they have set out such a broad world. They've gone into the cosmic. They've hinted at the magical, and they've in every film. And this is something actually that's just, I guess, just to think about bringing this to a close for today. This is something actually that I don't suppose we did really touch on in talking about Endgame. Is actually things like the 5-year jump, or things like introducing Professor Hulk. We don't have to see it happen.
Yep.
We can simply be told it has happened.
Yep.
And we accept that because of how well it's integrated into what we've seen before. And I think that's the beauty of what they've achieved in this whole cinematic universe, is that they can just say, here we are, and this is a mutant story, and then we're not told about mutants, we're shown mutants, as you say. Show, don't tell. Don't overcomplicate it. Just say to people, this is another corner of this beautiful universe that we've created.
Yeah.
And come with us and trust us, you're going to love it. I suppose the inevitable question though is, do you have any thoughts on what? I'm not going to ask you for actors' names, although you may have a couple of thoughts. But who would be, or what sort of person would be your Wolverine? Or what sort of, would you go for a short, hairy, kind of angry man? Or?
This is a video unto itself, and it's a video I'd love to do. Actually.
I know.
Uh,
Well, maybe we should. Maybe we should. But
Maybe we should.
some brief
Yeah.
thoughts.
But yeah, I don't mind which way they go with it as long as he's three-dimensional, and
Hmm.
I think that's something that's missed out, especially in group books like the X-Men a lot of the time, and people misinterpret the character a lot to be this kind of semi-idiot redneck who just likes swilling beer and watching the game. That's really not the core of the character. The guy has lived for a long time. He's been a samurai. He's studied, Shinto and the art of war, and he is a berserker with the mind of a philosopher. And I'd really like to see that three-dimensional character come through in this iteration. I love Hugh Jackman's take on Wolverine. But he is quite two-dimensional, and his absence of memory is a factor of that, but I don't think you need to emphasize that this time around. We've seen that story, we've seen Weapon X, we've seen his origin. I think, exactly like you say, they've built up enough credit at this stage where he could be introduced in costume, dropping out of a plane onto the Hulk, and people would be like, oh my shit, it's Wolverine and he's fighting the Hulk!
Yeah, and then you see Logan at home afterwards. Having been bruised up a bit, then you get to know him. Well, actually, in that sense, it's funny because you remind me as well of, in that sense, the strengths for me of Batman Begins as well.
Yeah.
Where with Batman Begins, they knew that you'd already seen an awful lot of this stuff, and they built on. I mean, in particular, in that film, something I like about the way that Bruce and Batman are intertwined. It's the way that obviously you see Bruce and you get to know Bruce before you ever see him in the costume. But also it's all summarised in the fact that he keeps his costume in that film in a Japanese cabinet. He keeps it. For him, it is tied up with the philosophy. It's tied up with the act of becoming the Bat and what that means for justice, what that means in... And so for Wolverine, bearing in mind Silver Samurai and all this other stuff that could be hinted at in his past, and then maybe that could be his solo movie as a prequel. Well, in that sense, do a Captain Marvel. Hint at him in the present and then show where he's come from.
Yeah.
For him, he's probably... I'd like to see a Wolverine who's reconciled the fact that yes, he is a killer, but also in that sense, so is his namesake. Wolverines kill things. Doesn't make the Wolverine inherently bad. It makes him what he is, and then to explore that, as you say, through Shinto or through some other related sort of philosophy could be really interesting.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because we've had the quote-unquote Japanese epic, but it didn't really delve into any of those areas.
No.
So, and he's intrinsically tied to, I think, maybe develop Madripoor separately and have Madripoor be the exotic locale, so to speak, and you could tie that into those Eastern things without going necessarily to Tokyo or that would be really interesting for me. But for me, it's like you say, like there needs to be more to it. I feel with all of these characters. In fact, it would be nice to see the depths of Cyclops, who is a really underrated character in most of those movies. We've seen a lot of Wolverine, but we've not necessarily seen much of the comic book Wolverine.
No.
In a lot of ways, we've seen quite a lot of Jean Grey and the Dark Phoenix stuff, and arguably we've seen a lot of Professor X. So maybe it's time that we could, and even a fair bit of Beast, to be honest, even though he's kind of a young, cutesy Beast now. But there are a lot of other areas you can go with those books. But
also having had now Wakanda, you could go into the backstory of Storm.
That would be cool. That would be really cool. Yeah, tie Storm into Wakanda like she is in the books. Was Queen of Wakanda at one point, isn't she?
Yes, she was. Yeah. But then have I'm not quite sure. I mean, it must have been in the books as well. But one of the key elements from the cartoon that I remember and loved was the fact that she was just desperately trying to live her life, and these people were trying to just claw her back to being. I think in the cartoon, she was. Obviously some sort of rain princess totem goddess type figure. I don't think it's for Wakanda though. I think it might have been Wakanda, but if it was Wakanda, it was a mud hut stereotype of Africa.
It was Egypt, I think.
It was, something like that. Something,
It always confused me at the time because it was like, okay, but this isn't what tallies with me for Egypt. But it was Egypt.
But having her, it would be interesting having almost a sort of a almost a Terminator style, a film that feels a bit like Terminator in so much as she's suddenly being, maybe she's not even fully aware. Maybe her mother had the same gift, brought her to America, and then suddenly there were these people trying to hunt her down. That could be interesting actually for a Storm movie.
Or you could go the Kitty Pryde route.
Yeah.
Have it all go through the Kitty Pryde route, because she's a really interesting character. She is one of a... Actually, this is another approach. Oh, man, we're really going off the topic. Before we cut this off, because we're on this topic, this is another approach. Wolverine has had multiple sidekicks over the years. Usually, teenage girls are his sidekicks, weirdly enough. I guess it's kind of the antithesis of having the teenage sidekick that Batman has. He always has these mutant teenage girl sidekicks, but there's nothing weird or creepy about it. He is like a genuine mentor. He sees himself as a father figure, and that's another thing that we only really get tiny hints of. Like in the first X-Men movie, we see it with, or 1 and 2 arguably, we see it with Rogue a bit, but she has kind of, you can tell she has kind of more feelings than that for him, so it kind of ruins that dynamic.
Well, it's kind of like when Doctor Who is badly written, where he needs to be in love with the person.
Yeah, exactly. Like you don't need that aspect to it, and that in a way I think is the brilliant counterpoint to the idea that you have this guy who is a quote unquote vicious killer. He's a berserker. He goes berserk. He kills people, but he's also this nurturing character who genuinely cares for and looks after and looks out for these teenagers in his care. And I think if you pushed him into that leadership role, you would, by necessity, see those qualities, like in a Wolverine and the X-Men, where he's the professor of the school. He becomes Professor Logan in the comic books. Maybe try something like that with it in the future. That would be great. You'd get to see so much more of especially these younger characters, the younger generation of mutants that we don't, Beak and like obscure people like that we don't see so much of or at all.
Yeah. Well, I suppose actually that there you've got a funny. There's the potential there to kind of do what they tried to do with Ben Affleck's Batman and tell a story that's from a little bit later on in Wolverine's life. But also, wouldn't it be great to see some of the students kind of whispering about, I hear he was unstoppable. Here he is, and maybe he just doesn't do that anymore. He hasn't done it for about 10 years. He is quite happy mentoring and teaching, and he's found a centered point in his life, and he's reconciled that.
Doesn't really age, so he could be older, but you could cast someone with longevity for the role.
Yeah.
Someone hairy enough.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Just need something hairy enough.
Someone with hairy arms, and then something brings him out of that. But crucially, as you say, you're starting from a point where he's not feral. I guess is the point. He's not just feral. We can show him as feral at some point or in flashbacks or something. But he starts out at the end of that journey, and again that would also hint at a bigger story that we just haven't been privy to so far in the MCU. It wouldn't, because I think that's probably going to be their biggest issue, isn't it? It's going to be, the question is, how do we have mutants and have no one, including this global organisation such as SHIELD or Hydra, for example, understand that these people are around and try and make use of them, and I mean, without repeating myself, I think we've touched on a few possible answers there here, haven't we, to that? But that's the big problem, isn't it? That's ultimately the problem. It's because they haven't been able to play with them. They just haven't hinted at them.
It would have been wonderful if they hadn't have, this is a Captain Marvel spoiler, so close your ears for a second if you haven't seen that, but if they hadn't have, I feel like underplayed or undervalued the whole Nick Fury losing his eye thing, and I won't specifically say what it was, but I felt like that was a wasted opportunity. Yeah. That would be a way to get Logan in, have him be one of Nick Fury's old contacts, have him have lost his eye to him.
Yeah. Oh,
now
God.
You've got a story.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Maybe he lost his eye to him, but he later saves him. It's and that's kind of what happens in Ultimates. In fact, that is their connection, is that Fury's kind of lost, Wolverine is a caged animal at the time. He's just being used to kill people in the field, and Fury ends up being saved by him in the desert because Fury's outgunned and outmanned, and this thing has escaped from its cage, and it comes out, it saves him, and it drags him back to camp. It's cool. It's really cool.
Yeah.
I might have to go and read that. How did we start talking about X-Men and talking about Endgame and end up finishing talking about Wolverine? I'm happy about it because he's one of my favorite characters of all time. But all roads lead to Wolverine in the Marvel universe. Okay.
Yeah, apparently. Well, and also, I don't want to talk about all of this now, but I think it's just something. It has to be mentioned in this video, though, or in this conversation, and that is Fantastic Four as well.
Of course, because Galactus.
Yeah. That's got to be the next, hasn't it? It's got to be.
It has to be, in a way.
Yeah.
And
in that sense, how do you get bigger than Thanos, Galactus? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How do you open the cosmic canvas?
Yeah.
And what they're dealing with, unfortunately, is a legacy of really poor reception for those characters and an audience familiarity that only has familiarity with very poor versions of those characters, especially with a very recent production that was Landis, wasn't it? Did the last one?
It wasn't. Yeah, but I think again, just briefly, I think the beauty of what they've done though is they've kind of done it the way that it would probably happen in real life. In so much as at the end of Endgame you have Stark saying, goodness me, Morgan's going to grow up in a universe which has got so much light and so much dark, and all these, not only are we not alone, but there's all these potentials out there. So he's hinting at this.
Yeah.
And then we, in the context of having also seen some of the cosmic, we've seen some civilization, we've seen some big bads, we've seen the adventures that the Guardians go on, and how amazing would it be to have even the Guardians and even those people out there, on the edge of these established civilizations. Suddenly, there's just rumours of this thing coming from outside of known space, and it is Galactus. So they take advantage of that, of the fact that they come at it basically from their strengths. They've established a really nice cosmic universe, and then they start to show this thing that's eating away at some of this known niceness. I think that's probably how you do it. You start well, and that, in that sense, that's also similar to how Thanos was done. Thanos was this sort of, he was a hint, wasn't he, at the end of Avengers? It was this sort of, they are unruly, therefore they cannot be ruled. To court them is to court death, and that's a strong hint of Thanos' love of death, Lady Death in the comics.
Yeah.
Which I think is a bit of a shame that actually they didn't bring back Hela as the goddess of death and Thanos, but that would have just been too much to have him. You'd have felt as much. I mean, the funny thing is, he's an anti-hero in that sense already, but then to give him a love interest as well, it would have just been too much.
I think Thanos doesn't need a love interest, but I know what you mean, because I was thinking the same thing in the film. I was just like, it kind of feels like there's just a slight bit missing.
Yeah.
But
it could have been Hela, but anyway, so you've got all this stuff in place, and in that sense, I think, whether they've done it deliberately or not, I don't know, but it's a logical extension. What else is out there?
Yeah.
And it's your I forgot what the philosopher's name is, but the whole staring into the darkness, and this darkness stares back into you.
Stares back at you. Be careful when you stare into darkness, the abyss, because the abyss stares back. Oh, I know this quote. There's a longer thing. It'll come back to me.
What the guy's name now, isn't it? But
it'll come back to me.
Was it Blade? No. It's Tell you what, actually, I'm just going to Google it.
Google it. We'll cut this part out.
No, I don't even have to cut it out. I'm just going to Google it live.
Curses.
We'll do it live. Let's see. Stare into the darkness.
Abyss.
The abyss. Okay.
Abyss stares back. That's the Google.
Nietzsche. That's it.
Nietzsche.
Friedrich Nietzsche. Of course.
Nietzsche, baby.
Of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, draw on that.
More on that.
Out of the darkness comes this thing, and also, actually, crucially, don't have him be a cloud.
Yeah,
he needs to be Unicron. Basically, that's what it needs to be.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Well,
Orson
because
Welles' last role at
yeah,
that.
but the thing is, actually it's beautiful because they've already introduced the idea of a sentient planet, Ego, the living planet. So you could have him be a Unicron type character. So it wouldn't be. I don't think it'd be too weird to have him be essentially a planetary body that is a sort of similar entity to Ego, which he is, I guess, in the comics as well. He is a similar sort of power level in that sense, and have him kind of transmogrify into, because really what the comic book fans want to see is Galactus, the I mean, Titan doesn't really do him justice, but the Titan, grabbing a chunk of the moon and eating it, this kind of thing. But
Yeah.
and then of course Silver Surfer as well.
Yep.
Let's bring this
Yep.
to a close. We can address
Yep.
this in the future.
Yep.
It's been a pleasure, and
Absolutely.
and we're doing okay. I mean, I know we promised to do one of these once a month, but I mean, we've had things have happened. It's understandable.
there.
It's fine. Yeah, we're getting there.
We're getting
But maybe next month we can expand on a couple of things. And
To be honest, it's going to take people a month to watch this anyway. We've been talking for hours. So I don't think we can give them more content than this. They'll never get round to watching it.
No, I think we're approaching 2 hours. I think we've done well, but it's I'm really pleased that we actually got to see it, and also to finally actually talk about it. Something that occurred to me as well is that we shouldn't underestimate. I mean, also in the context of what's been going on with you recently, we should not underestimate that we are both lucky to have actually seen all of this happen. So
Yep.
I mean, just very briefly, I remember when I saw Lord of the Rings, being just heartbroken that my dad never got to see it. You know, we should not underestimate, and neither should you at home, that we've seen this. This has happened in our lifetimes. How wonderful is that?
Yeah, it's true. You can't really put a price on great art, can you? And that's ultimately what it is, I think.
Yeah.
That's my Thundercats moral of the story.
I think so.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, very good point. And there are many people I would have liked to have shared these films with, or this universe with, who would have really loved them and appreciated them. So we need to appreciate that we get the chance and not just sit in the comment section bitching about this. You hear me, people in the comment section bitching about this?
No, and sorry, and in that
No
sense,
gratitude.
In that sense, I promise you, I'm not just saying, cry monkey, cry. It's more just the case of, I think that's actually, for me, I know it was one of the thoughts that occurred to me on the way when I was leaving the cinema, as I was thinking actually that, I just know of people who would have loved this so much. And,
Yeah, absolutely.
we shouldn't underestimate that. As much as you say, there are decisions that could be made differently, and you might go, "Oh, Captain Marvel's a bit annoying," but what an age to live in.
What a time. This is the golden age of superhero cinema. You really need to sit and let that sink in, because, this is like unprecedented. And that is what makes it so special right now. We're going to see this repeated, possibly ad nauseum into the future, but it will never be the same as this bit right here, where we had a payoff of 21 movies or whatever it's been, where we got to see that develop and happen for the first time. It's like watching an epic be written. It's like listening to, maybe comparing it to Homer's Odyssey is a little bit strong, but at the same time, this is modern mythology, man.
It is, and Homer's Odyssey, and that's this is sort of like glass territory, or unbreakable territory, drawing that comparison, but in a very real way, actually, the Iliad was written for people to hear while drunk. It starts out basically, and also the same goes for Beowulf. It starts out with the person who is telling the story. This isn't a story that's meant to be read; it's meant to be said out loud. And they say, essentially, put your drinks down and listen. It's entertainment, and we are living in a wonderful age of entertainment, definitely.
Now go out and get a Marvel Unlimited subscription and stop bitching about representation. It's all good, baby. It's all good. Just read the books you enjoy. All right, I'm done. What would Wolverine do, man?
Yeah. So I have got other thoughts that I could expand on. I've got a very funny thought. But no, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
We'll come back to this many and many a time, I'm sure.
We will. Okay, right. Well, I've got to end, otherwise I'll just laugh too much. As ever, guys at home, thank you for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed this, and until next time, do take care. Bye-bye. Nice reference.